Little evening popper for us after 2 busy days, no doubt.
I love doing popper when my brain has given up, because that really means that you know it if you get it right.
Like running an ultra marathon and mind over matter, baby, It's just...
Well, it'd just be fascinating for us to see how it all goes. Popper 25.
Mm-hmm.
How did we like 25?
Well, looking at the page on this one, you think, this doesn't look so bad, because there's fewer notes, like there's the little semiquiver rests everywhere. But I actually thought this one is one of those studies. It's about like a very specific technique, and I think it's about building strength in the upper, at the tip. So really strengthen your arm. I don't know about you, but I felt like quite tired, even like a third of a way through this. And this is week this study's been a little microwaved, so I haven't had the usual time to allow the muscles to catch up. So I think it was trickier than I thought, but manageable in a way. And there's some little kind of tongue twistery bits of the left hand where it's kind of like brain left hand coordination issue. But how did you find it?
Again, same type of thing. Like, it's really interesting because obviously this one has to feel in 2, or else it, kind of feels like it's going to be some form of torture. So in order to think about those long lines, it's really fascinating to think about that actual technique when you're doing down up. So I was quite intrigued with when I do that down up stroke here, like there. I don't think too much about the fact that I want, the up bow to have a bit more strength. But here, it really sounds quite distorted if you end up going instead of. So you do have to have a little bit of weight on the up bow.
Totally. And tell me, though, because the issue I had, and I bet you have a brilliant solution for this, was that when I emphasized, right, when we try to emphasize a stronger beat, naturally what happens is we sort of make our way down the bow. So I would find that I'd be in the middle of sort of one of those louder passages, and I was like, oh no, I'm here, and it should be at the tip.
Yeah.
Did you what's your sort of solution for that?
So especially somewhere like bar 9 where we're fortissimo. So you do have to almost give a little more, I love the way I'm showing the wrong part of the bow, but more first finger pressure, so that ba almost pulls it fast and light for you. So, but you're using the tension release to get back up the bow.
Yeah.
Ba-da. So hopefully, and then that tension release will just end up being the same value. Now, wait till the playthrough and we'll see how often I end up in the middle of the bow. But that's the theory.
That's the theory, yeah. And like, again, if you were practicing, if you were really wanting to work on strength in the arm and this reflex thing, this would be a great study to practice for like a month and just sort of really, really get used to that. Because it's not, to be honest, it's not really part of the bow we play in consistently for a long time. That often, and I have to say, I can't think of any repertoire off the top of my head that does this a lot, but certainly you'd get passages in like orchestral playing where you have to do stuff at the tip, especially if it's been bowed by a violinist, right? Because violinists love playing.
Absolutely. And I tend to, when I'm leading for that sort of thing, say, that's not the way the cello works. So I just ignore it and play it at a point in the bow where it does work efficiently. But that doesn't often work for orchestral playing and people get annoyed. So you do have to sometimes go, okay, fine, we'll stay up there. But what I find very interesting about this is that muscle here, you notice that's where, so you're thinking about the two sides of that, because the arm is out in its kind of slightly tenser position, you have to be able to find a way where you can actually relax the muscle. So if you clamp that for the entire piece, you have to actually make sure that you register that you're relaxing that muscle, so that you don't all the time, especially in the piano, you can actually have a much more relaxed stroke that doesn't put so much tension up here. And then you'll find you'll be able to play through the whole study much more efficiently. But that would be one thing I would encourage all students to do is see, can you make the difference between this with a tense muscle there and then relax it. Thinking about a little bit more of just but making sure your shoulder and your muscle are really relaxed, and then as much as they can be, because obviously we're in a tension position.
Yeah, and I think also,
yeah.
Well, I think also along those lines, noticing that obviously tension will tend to build when it's louder. But I also found for myself, when there's more string crossings, it's sort of a thing of like, this works itself out in lots of different, places in cello repertoire, but it's this thing of like the body's confusion in a way about the string crossings can also add to the tension. So I think, all the stuff we always talk about, like being really mindful of the string crossings, knowing where you're doing that, because oftentimes I'll find that like if I'm tensing or I'm getting more tired, it's because there's something that's not clear about where the bow's meant to be. So I think just being really mindful and like taking the time to dissect those things, I'm hoping that works for me this week.
I have no doubt it will. Should we talk about that rhythmic feature?
Yeah.
We've talked about it a lot before, but just the fact that you do always want to think, obviously it's faster than that, but that you are always subdividing, and particularly when there is something mental going on the left hand or the right hand. So bar 6, this kind of idea. So you really can't let it suddenly get triplety.
Yeah.
When something nasty is happening, and it's all fine to keep your rhythm intact when everything feels peachy, but to really find those places where there are just a few odd areas where there are some unusual string crossings. Mostly, I think, a clockwise circle, actually. That's where I always find them.
Yeah, like the place you mentioned, and then also bar 8, of course, is those two are really...
I loved your
probably some of the hardest moments for the bow stuff.
Absolutely. There's a few other little tiny places like that within it. But yeah, for me, I don't know about you, but I definitely used a bit of wrist coming for that. So rather than just whole arm, you can use just this. That actually does give you an extra lever, which makes things easier. So don't just use your arm, or else you'll start using all of your energy and you'll be dead by line.
Wrist, and also for me, I think of the forearm coming down, which I'm trying to show you. But yes, the good old lever.
Yeah, exactly. I used to call it robot arm when people started, because you could do this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that too. Oh,
so much fun.
Speaking my language.
It's a shame you can't do a bow change like that.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome. Sometime next cello time.
Yeah.
What about things, little areas where, say, the left hand is just a little bit quirky?
Yeah, I mean, so I found particularly, let's see if I can find the exact bar. I thought 29 to 33 was quite tricky for me. It's just these little tiny half-step shifts all the time, but because we're doing string crossings as well, the pattern is always changing slightly. It's one of those things you just need to get your head around. You probably found some really clever solution that I didn't even think of.
I love the fact that you have such I don't know, respect for my decision-making skills, but that all comes down to how much time I have to prepare, right?
Yeah, but it works for you, so.
Well, that short time pressure really makes me come to my best. But yeah, so basically, I found that whole section from 27 fascinating, because this suddenly going across from the A string to the C string, I think is really interesting. People could do an awful lot of stop-go practice. Move. so that you're ready, you know exactly where you should be. I think that's always a challenge. Sometimes it's easier to get back up to the A string.
Yeah.
It's the direction of the circle, you know, back to my bow circles. But yeah,
It's
so
circles as well as I think to add on to that, you know, the placement of the bow towards the bridge. If we're trying to, so that passage is forte. So myself just, you know, will, I think generally as humans retort to like more pressure if we're like panicked and not thinking about ergonomically the best way to do these things. But it's also the fact that we want the string to stay even, and the C string is that much wider and fatter and takes longer to speak. So I think really anticipating and being mindful, you know, you probably are going to have to use a bit more weight to get some of these to speak. But if you do that consistently through the study, you will burn out, you know? So I think it's also just like being really aware of those things and your decisions about when you're going to do them and stuff.
Yeah. And what you said about the semitone shifts, I think absolutely in the bar before, let's say 30, so we have semitone, semitone, semitone. So being really clear of the fact that you have 3 semitone shifts in a row and knowing that's what they are, and then you don't move. So that kind of clarification in your brain. And where that totally melted my brain, actually, due to not enough time on the study, obviously, bar 54. So that line I found fascinating, because here you've got semitone shift with your first finger, let's say. Tone shift with your first finger now. Semitone. So many things going on in that one little phrase, because for a while I was kind of like, but it's still only a semitone. You know, I had to decide what I was shifting with. And it's my first finger that needs to either move a tone or a semitone. There's only one tone in there.
Yeah.
That's a real brain melt.
Do you know, I just am looking at this. I wish I'd done this. I wonder if it would be helpful, but I was like, I should have divided them out and just practiced just the top and then just the bottom.
Exactly.
Do you think that would have been useful? I don't know in this situation.
Absolutely.
I think it would have been.
Oh, well. I think anything that can actually just clarify a bit more in your brain. And even on top of that, if I had time for this, I would have definitely done it with bone open strings as well.
Oh yeah.
Because this is fine. So that sudden change into bar 56 always kind of caught me out when I get there, and I wouldn't quite understand why, because obviously it looks very easy on the page.
Yeah.
You just had the same pattern the whole time for 2 bars, and suddenly now you're just over 2 strings rather than 3. So stuff like that we need to pay attention to.
Totally. And I think as well, okay, so the other brain melty part for me, and you're just like, thanks, Popper, for putting that in there on the second page, the double flats, you know, 35, 36. And he does that tricky, you know, it looks, the way, the string he asks us to play on, I'll put a little screenshot up of the passage so people know, but it's very confusing. You know, it's not like what you would choose to read something necessarily, but he's definitely done that completely intentionally to make our brains
go. Of course,
that
does make me slightly angry as a, you know, composer, as in I know he was doing that to make our brains better, so Popper is allowed. But if I see other people doing that, often there's this rule that you should write in the key that your piece is in as a composer. So you'll often find people have put chords in on the piano. That's how they wrote it. And then they separate it to instruments. And then it makes absolutely no sense as a single line. So here, of course, it would be much easier if you just wrote a D in all those harmonics. So rather than you thinking, oh God, what string do I go to? It's actually just a note you know very well. So well done, Popper, for messing with our brains.
Yes, thanks for the extra challenge. Really appreciate it on a Monday evening.
Me too. I find it fascinating as well. There were 3 places, and usually the tuning thing for me, because we've both worked on our tuning forever. You know, there've been hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of this kind of practice done already. But I found it fascinating just there that if we would go from bar 34, that F, just the first one, because of the key that we're in, felt funny to pitch. And once that was in tune, then everything else was in tune. And there were a few other notes like that, like bar 7, the last semiquaver, funnily enough. Once that C is superbly in tune, then the rest of it doesn't seem so chromatic-y.
It's funny because it is in B flat, but it moves a lot of keys. But I found the same, and I also thought like bar 9. You know, a lot of times like those setting the new key area or whatever, that F I found really easy to play too sharp.
Yeah, so good for people to find out. You know, the usual thing: record yourself, see where a note sounds just a tiny bit ambiguous, and then work that into the bar. So you really are zoning in for that. And then I think the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah. Well,
did you like the chords at the end? How did you play them all arpeggiated, or did you?
Don't know. I didn't make any decisions about this. I think mostly rolled. What about you?
I did them all rolled, but I think I read. Now, don't quote me on it because I obviously didn't pay too much attention. But I think I read something in the notes in the barn writer saying you should do roll. Not roll. Now, maybe I imagined that. It's very possible, but I thought it was a terrible idea.
Interesting. I think somebody is working their compositional muscles there. That idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It is a textural difference, and I appreciate the moxie for that. But for me, all of this at the end has to be. You have to be like a harpist, right? It just has to kind of feel like you're a minstrel at the end of a piece, and I have arrived.
I know, and we need the release after this sort of.
Oh my god! It's actually just for the arm to let the
I know. Let it all shake out.
I love it.
Oh,
okay.
Is it time, Ailbhe?
I think we should do it. Let's do it.
All right. Are you first this week?
I think I am first this week.
Ooh. Delayed gratification. That was amazing. Yay. I loved the rolled chords at the end.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes.
They felt good. So
good. Super.
Thank you.
Oh.
Amazing. Super job.
Oh.
I love it.
Do you know, playing this through, I was like, actually, there's a lot of opportunity for music in this. A lot of capriciousness, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's actually lovely.
Yeah, quite enjoyable. Quite an enjoyable workout.
Yeah, exactly. One can say that. I have a really toned right side now.
I don't know if it does too much for the toning. I can still do a lot of shaky over here. So, but it feels like it did. So
yeah, it's a very niche toning.
Very niche muscle group. Anyway, well done, my dear.
Lovely. See you next
time. For the next one.
Yay!
All right.